So this is the final brief presentation on the topic of sentence types before you get into doing some work on your own on sentence variety. This one is going to cover complex sentences as the title states, but we will also briefly mention compound complex sentences at the end. So the first thing that you need to know about is subordinating conjunctions, and this picture is related, believe it or not. The idea of a subordinate is demonstrated here. You have one kid who is the boss, and he seems to be yelling at the other one who is his subordinate. So subordinate means under in terms of power or in terms of importance, and a subordinate clause is the same way, a dependent clause. It's a clause that cannot exist alone. You can look at page 353 in your textbook for a list of the types of conjunctions, subordinating conjunctions, and how they function. Specifically, a clause that is formed with a subordinating conjunction is an adverb clause, and we'll see some examples of those in a couple of slides. So the next thing that you need to know about is relative pronouns. Relative pronouns are pronouns that introduce either adjective clauses or noun clauses. The list right there that you can see, that, which, who, whoever, whom, whomever, whose, where, when, those can introduce adjective or noun clauses. There are some other question words that can also introduce noun clauses, like the word how or how much, how many, and some others. Adjective clauses, you can see, describe something and are restrictive or non-restrictive. Now, if you don't completely understand this, don't worry. We'll get into this concept in more detail later in this course. However, for now, there's an example of one restrictive and one non-restrictive. Restrictive adjective clauses use no commas, and restrictive means that it is necessary. Non-restrictive adjective clauses do use commas around the adjective clause because it is unnecessary information. The information does not identify what it is describing. So look at the two examples. The teacher who just started working at the college loves his job. And then the other one, Mr. D, who just started working at the college, loves his job. In the first one, we may not know who the teacher is unless we describe him a little bit more, who just started working at the college. But in the second one, we're using a name, so we don't need that extra information to identify the person. Noun clauses, then, and again, we'll look at these in more detail later. Noun clauses replace a noun, either the subject or object of the verb or the object of a preposition. Some examples include, what the doctor told her wasn't what she wanted to hear. That included two noun clauses. In other words, the news that she got wasn't the news that she wanted. What he told her wasn't what she wanted to hear. And another example, where he lives is really hot. That place is really hot. His country is really hot. So it replaces the idea of a noun. So complex sentences, quite simply, contain a dependent clause and an independent clause. And again, we said the dependent clauses can be adverb, adjective, or noun clauses. We'll talk about all of those in some more detail later in the course. Look at some examples with adverb clauses. Because Rob stayed up late playing video games, he was tired and failed the exam. The first clause is a dependent subordinate clause. It's an adverb clause, and that is because it has the word because at the beginning. The next one, Jane and Bill are going to watch Netflix and chill when she gets to his house. When she gets to his house is a future time clause, and again, that is another adverb clause, and it is the dependent clause. Using adjective clauses, let's look at these examples. The restaurant that serves seafood is delicious. So the words in there, that serves seafood, describe the restaurant. It tells us something about the restaurant. The man who stole her purse was eventually arrested. And again, if we just say the man was eventually arrested, that information doesn't have a lot of context. So that adjective clause gives us some extra context and we can understand why he was arrested. And finally, using a noun clause. That you didn't study for the exam is too bad. It's like saying the fact that you didn't study for the exam is too bad. And in the next one, something tells me that what she said was untrue. She said something, I don't know what it is in this case, but what she said was untrue. Now, quickly, compound complex sentences. It's just a complex sentence of some type with an extra independent clause connected by either a comma plus one of the fanboy's words or a semicolon. So some examples. The fact that Ashley was running late was unfortunate, but she wasn't going to get in trouble. So what we have here is that Ashley was running late is a dependent clause. The fact was unfortunate. What fact? The fact that she was running late. And then attached at the end, we see but followed by another independent clause. She wasn't going to get in trouble. The next one, we went to the pound to adopt a dog, but they were so cute that we ended up with two. So at the end here, we have our dependent clause. Before that, we have our two independent clauses attached or put together with a fanboy, but again in this case. We went to the pound to adopt a dog, independent clause. They were so cute, independent clause. That we ended up with two is our dependent clause. So, some practices to cover these ideas. 19-2, 19-3, and 19-4 on the indicated pages. And that is it for sentence types.